My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood. Today it's the first day of voting in the Tory leadership race, and we'll be speaking to representatives from the three leading campaigns. All that to come after the headlines.
A very good morning. It's 9:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. 8 Conservative candidates face the first round of MPs' votes today to determine who will continue in the battle to become Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, Tom Tugendhat, Kemi Badenoch, Penny Mordaunt, Jeremy Hunt, Nadhim Zahawi and Suella Braverman are all on the ballot. The remaining candidates have to hit a threshold of 30 votes today to stay in the race. The results will be announced at 5 p.m. The UK economy grew by 0.5% in May, following a 0.2% drop in April. Analysts had expected the figures to remain flat. The ONS says the growth came after a bounce back across all services, manufacturing and construction, with a particular increase in demand for health services and holidays. The president of Sri Lanka has fled to the Maldives hours before he was due to resign. A state of emergency has been declared and a curfew imposed in the aftermath of the premier's escape. Protests continue in the country with ongoing demonstrations caused by anger over inflation and widespread fuel and medicine shortages. Twitter is suing Elon Musk for breaking a £37 billion deal to buy the social media platform. Twitter's asking a US court to order the Tesla owner to complete the merger at the agreed share price. Last week, Musk said he was terminating the deal because Twitter failed to provide information regarding how many fake accounts were on the platform. An amber warning for extreme heat has been issued for this Sunday and next Monday. The Met Office are warning of potential of exceptionally high temperatures that could impact infrastructure, travel and cause adverse health impacts on the general population. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now let's head back to The Briefing this morning with Tom.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:34 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Well, today we explore the leading 3 prime ministerial campaigns in detail with some of their most high-profile backers. The contender who is far and away ahead in terms of public nominations, of course, is former Chancellor Rishi Sunak. He yesterday launched his campaign, introduced by Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab. Sunak is running a more establishment campaign, undoubtedly slick, but facing accusations of being light on policy. Let's listen to a quick clip of what the former Chancellor said at his launch event yesterday morning.
We need to have a grown-up conversation about the central policy question that all candidates have to answer in this election. Do you have a credible plan to protect our economy and get it growing? My message to the party and the country is simple. I have a plan to steer our economy through these headwinds. We need a return to traditional Conservative economic values, and that means honesty and responsibility, not fairy tales. As is the fact that once we've gripped inflation, I will get the tax burden down. It is a question of when, not if.
Rishi Sunak there, launching his campaign yesterday. Well, one of those high-profile backers of Rishi Sunak's campaign is the former chief whip turned COVID rebel, Mark Harper. Welcome to the programme, Mark. I suppose, first of all, what attracted you to Rishi Sunak? Why are you backing the former Chancellor's campaign?
Well, Tom, people that listen to this show will know that I've, for a while now, was very clear about why I felt Boris Johnson needed to go. And I think Rishi Sunak will be a breath of fresh air. He's going to restore trust, I think, to the way government is run. I think he's got very sound, solid economic policies, as you just heard there in that clip, about being honest with people about the challenges facing us. And I think he appeals to voters across the whole United Kingdom, Leave voters, Remain voters, people in the north, people in the south, to help bring the United Kingdom together. So that's why I'm backing him. And I came out and declared for him last Friday when he announced his campaign. And I'm very happy to be going out on the airwaves and talking to you this morning to explain why.
It's interesting listening to this pitch about being sort of this fresh face, relatively unsullied, and all the rest of it, because, of course, Rishi Sunak has been at the centre of government policy for the last 2.5 years. Would he really represent a change from those years, as he has been really at the core of Downing Street, at the core of the economic policy, at the core of the last government's political operation?
Well, look, I think on the change front, it's going to be about style and about honesty and integrity. On economic policy, I'm very happy to, and I think he's very happy to defend the decisions he's made over the last couple of years. I mean, we've had a 1 in a 300-year economic shock with the global pandemic. I'm incredibly proud of the pace and the scope of the package that he rolled out with furlough and all of the support to the hospitality and leisure sector that was absolutely pummeled by COVID. You mentioned I was chair of the COVID recovery group. Rishi Sunak was the strongest supporter in government of taking balanced decisions that dealt with the threat from COVID, but also recognised that you had to keep the economy functioning and all of the other risks. And I felt very comforted when I was chair of the COVID recovery group that he was making those arguments inside government. And I think he's the only candidate that's laying out a really serious pitch about dealing with inflation, getting taxes down, and you heard in his clip, it's when, not if, but you can't roll out massive unfunded tax cuts and massive spending pledges and remain credible. And the Conservative Party has taken a long time to establish economic credibility, and I don't want us to lightly throw that away.
What some of the other contenders in this race are saying is that potentially the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak has his ideas the wrong way round. Rather than waiting for growth and a more stable financial footing in order to then cut taxes, other contenders are saying, in order to get that growth, in order to get that more stable financial footing, you need to cut taxes first.
Well, look, I simply don't buy that argument. If you do very significant personal tax cuts, you're going to fuel inflation. If you make very significant corporate tax cuts, there's no evidence, if you look back at over the last decade, that very low rate of corporation tax we've had in the UK has actually driven business investment. And actually listening to business groups, what they're arguing for is not cuts to corporation tax. What they're arguing for is investment incentives. So he delivered the super deduction, which has had a big impact. And before he resigned as Chancellor, he was in the process of looking at the best way of incentivising investment. And he's taking advantage of Brexit opportunities. He was a big champion before being Chancellor of free ports, and he's delivered those as Chancellor. The new Financial Services Act is just about to change the rules for big insurance companies to make sure they invest British money in Britain. And he, as a Leave supporting person, and when he was a new MP, backed Leave from the beginning, he knows and has been delivering the benefits from Brexit that will help grow the economy faster. And I think that's the right way to do it.
No one can doubt that the super deduction has been a very good policy change, although that is a temporary tax cut as things stand. Might we expect this candidate to bring forward some concrete policy? Because so far, in his campaign, we haven't heard much that's new. We've heard a lot about the record, but we haven't heard much that might change. Might we be hearing that this super deduction may become permanent? Might we be hearing more concrete policy as this campaign moves forward?
Yes, look, as the campaign moves forward, he's obviously going to set out more details of the things that he'll do if he's successful at getting elected as the leader of the party and chancellor. This campaign's only been, nominations only opened yesterday, and we're going to start voting today. If he's in the final two, we'll get down to the final two by the middle of next week. We're then going to have quite an extensive period over the summer, going around the country, campaigning with Conservative members and on the media, and there will be lots of opportunities there to set out his case in detail over that period. So I'm sure you'll hear more detail at the appropriate time, but people know he's got a solid record as a fiscal Conservative, making the tough decisions that are necessary to get the economy on track. And I'm very comfortable defending the decisions he made during the pandemic. I know there's lots of support for those across the country, and the extensive help he delivered as Chancellor to help people with the rising energy prices that will steadily be delivered to people through this year. And I think that's helping ordinary people get through the challenges using the power of government where you can, but being honest with people about the limits to that. And I think the British people are up for having politicians that are honest and straightforward with them and take the difficult decisions to help them in their everyday lives. And that's why I'm backing Rishi Sunak, because he's the man to get that job done.
In our final 20 seconds, Mark Harper, Jacob Rees-Mogg has apparently branded Rishi Sunak as our socialist chancellor. Is Rishi Sunak a socialist?
Of course he's not. He's a Conservative with Conservative values, running a really sensible, fiscally Conservative policy. He's someone that looks to Margaret Thatcher as an inspiration, and so he's a solid Conservative Chancellor in the pantheon of Conservative Chancellors like Nigel Lawson, and I think he'll be a fantastic Prime Minister if he's successful at winning this race. Solid economic policy and solid leadership for the country.
Well, Mark Harper, thank you so much for putting forward that case this morning on the briefing. Really appreciate your time and indeed all
Thanks,
of
Tom.
that information. Cheers. Well, now let's move on to how today is going to play out. Well, shortly we're going to see the official launch of Penny Mordaunt's campaign. That's at 10:30 this morning. And then this morning within Parliament, behind closed doors, the so-called 92 group of more conservative MPs, that's Conservative with a small c, they'll host their hustings. And then at midday, Prime Minister's questions as Boris Johnson faces Sir Keir Starmer for the penultimate ever time across those dispatch boxes. Then, after lunch and more frantic campaigning within Parliament, the first official round of voting begins. Tory MPs will troop through to the committee room corridor in the Palace of Westminster, casting their votes between 1:30 and 3:30 this afternoon. Any candidate with more than 30 backers will proceed to tomorrow's round of voting, and we'll learn exactly who's moving forwards in the contest at 5 p.m, with those results being announced by 1922 committee chairman Sir Graham Brady. And then, with barely a chance to catch their breath, the remaining candidates, those who have secured more than 30 votes today, then dive into a further private 1922 committee hustings. And then tomorrow, as MPs vote again, the lowest-ranking candidate will be eliminated. It's important to note here that it's unlikely we'll get to our final two candidates, those who go out to our wider party membership ballot, by tomorrow. There'll be further ballots of MPs until enough candidates are either eliminated or drop out in order to get to those final two. And that's the process of this race. It's technical and rapid, but crucially important. At 5 p.m. today, we'll learn who has made it through. Now, we were talking about the launch of that Penny Mordaunt campaign, which is expected at 10:30 this morning. Penny Mordaunt has been a surprise contender, I suppose, in this race. Not that she's a contender, but by how well she is doing. The second largest number of MP backers after Rishi Sunak. She, of course, officially launches this morning at an event in Westminster. Now, one of the campaign's most high-profile backers is former Brexit secretary, a former Tory leadership contender in and of himself, David Davis. But Penny Mordaunt doesn't just boast David Davis. She also can boast some of the newer MPs as well. This is a campaign that has 26 declared MPs as things stand. Although that number was at 26 yesterday, it has no doubt risen now. David Davis, of course, declaring yesterday for Penny Mordaunt. And I'm delighted to say that David Davis can join us now from College Green outside Parliament. Welcome to the programme, David. I suppose, first of all, why did you choose Penny Mordaunt? What is it about the former Defence Secretary, Penny Mordaunt, that, in your view, makes her next Prime Minister?
Well, this is an incredibly important election. Whoever deals with it is going to have to take over from a party in some disarray and is going to have to face some of the hardest problems a modern Prime Minister's faced, particularly stagflation, high inflation and low growth, right? Firstly, she has to pass an integrity test in my mind. All of them, all the candidates have to pass an integrity test in my mind. This is one of those occasions where we can't have another scandal in the next year. She, apart from herself being, as it were, clear of those things, she's also, like me, we've talked about it before in office, favours a much cleaner approach to politics than we've seen historically. You know, we've had all sorts of scandals over money and God knows what. And so we're in the same place. So that's a clear pass for her. Secondly, the question of courage and clarity of vision, if you like, and competence. She's experienced. She's had 2 different cabinet posts. She's been in the cabinet and in government generally for a number of years. She's worked alongside me, so I can make my judgments from reality, seeing her in action. And the starkest of those was the great showdown at Chequers, that arguably the cabinet meeting has had more effect on the history of the country than any other, when Theresa May tried to push through her vision for Brexit against mine. And Theresa May, the Prime Minister, and 20 other cabinet members wanted to go one way. Penny was the fiercest, strongest, clearest arguer in the other direction, in favour of proper Brexit, where we are now, really, the direction we're going now. And she wasn't just brave, she was incredibly articulate. Now, I picked that out as a single example, but it's been repeated time and time again in all my meetings with her in government over the years. So she's clearly up to the job. She's clearly got the guts to do it. She's clearly got the competence to do it. Finally, we are arguing about a vision of the country. I mean, you've got Rishi making his argument for, as it were, more of the same, and virtually every other candidate arguing for lower taxes, for a variety of things. Now, it's wonderful, this, for someone like me. I mean, John Redwood and I and a few others have been the sort of lone voices for tax cutting and inflation control over the last couple of years. Nobody else has. Now all of a sudden everybody is bidding for the lowest possible tax. Penny's got a much more thoughtful approach. She wants to see tax cuts. She wants to see us competitive with the rest of the world. She wants to see us turbocharging our growth rate. And that's not just taxes, that's innovation and incentives and all the other things that are necessary for this. And she's got a proper vision there. Finally, like me, she's a reserve soldier, a reserve naval officer in her case. She's patriotic. She believes in her country. She believes in the standards and approach of her country. Historically, which thinks like me, we're one of the greatest nations in the world. That package for me, when I eventually sat down and went through it all, was overwhelming. And I think it's overwhelming too for the party in the country, and I hope it will be for the party in the House.
Doubt that Penny Mordaunt is a strong performer at the dispatch box, and no one can doubt that she believes in Brexit. But David Davis, you are someone who has taken a very principled position on a number of other issues. On just about every issue, I think most people can say where David Davis stands. Is the same true about Penny Mordaunt? Where is she on economic policy? Because it seems to me that there's a big battle brewing between Penny Mordaunt and Liz Truss in terms of who is that key challenger to Rishi Sunak, who is going to be the person carrying the standard for the tax cutters of the party.
Well, what I suggest you do is you watch her speech she's going to make in about half an hour, because that's precisely, I think, what she's talking about. But the truth is, this is not just an auction of tax cuts. If it turns into an auction of tax cuts, the policy we'll end up with at the end of this won't help the country through the next few years. It's got to be thoughtful. It's got to be tax cuts that deliver growth, tax cuts that help reduce inflation, not increase it. I mean, the Treasury keeps saying tax cuts increase inflation. No, they don't. Sometimes, in rare circumstances, they do. But there are ways in which you can use tax cuts to bring down the pressure on inflation. So there's a whole variety of things. It's got to be thought through properly. This is not just an exercise of me, me, me. I've suddenly decided I'm whatever. I match this or that demand from the party. This is a thoughtful approach which will actually work. And that's the key point. Will it work? If we are running an economic policy that's working at the next general election, we'll win. If we're running one which is made up of populist nonsense, we'll lose.
Well, David Davis, thank you so much for putting forward that passionate case to us this morning on The Briefing. Really appreciate your time there, and we will be watching that launch in just half an hour or so's time. Now, one of those expected to do well today too is the candidate currently in third place by declared backers, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss. She scored the support of two big cabinet hitters yesterday, with Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nadine Dorries, both declaring their support for the boosterish free marketeer after a cabinet meeting. Now, Rees-Mogg pitches Liz Truss as a true Conservative, someone who has consistently opposed Rishi Sunak's tax hikes. Indeed, Jacob Rees-Mogg went as far as saying that Liz Truss is sort of the only person who can deliver the supply-side reform, who's been backing Jacob Rees-Mogg in Cabinet in terms of delivering those benefits of Brexit. And indeed, Jacob Rees-Mogg has been severely taking the fight to Rishi Sunak, saying this morning that he will not serve in a Rishi Sunak cabinet because Rishi Sunak does not believe in the opportunities of Brexit in the same way that Liz Truss does. An interesting argument, given that Liz Truss is someone who, in 2016, actually backed Remain. Although clearly getting that Brexiteer support has been a big boost to her campaign this time around. Liz Truss is responsible for all of those trade deals that we saw as we were leaving the European Union. Well, one of her big backers is Julian Knight, the chairman of the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee. Welcome to the programme, Julian. First of all, why did you choose Liz out of the broad array of candidates that we see before us?
Well, I worked with Liz in the Treasury, and I saw firsthand the way in which she deals with colleagues, the way in which she has a broad appeal, her grasp of the subject matter, and also, frankly, I think she has real instincts, conservative instincts that are closest to mine as a free marketeer, as a Thatcherite conservative. And I think that basically she sees the challenges that we have as a country, and I believe that she has the answers to many of those challenges. But what's more, I think that she has the right instincts. I think that we need a Conservative Party and a Conservative government which is true to itself and follows through on those policies, rather than frankly trying to, as we have done over many years now, I think maybe we have to cede too much ground to the left.
A lot of people will say that Liz Truss is impeccable on policy and on conviction, but remain to be convinced on gravitas and how she comes across at the dispatch box or indeed in potential debates. How does she answer those criticisms?
Well, I think she's come across very well in the hustings to date, and she tends to be very, very thoughtful. She takes a moment to think about her answers, and she gives very considered answers. I mean, I've seen her firsthand dealing with colleagues in a spending review, and she takes no prisoners. She's a clear supply-side reforming, tax-cutting Conservative. And my word, haven't we needed that? We've got the highest tax burden in 70 years. I'm afraid as a Conservative, I'm ashamed of that. And we need to get that down, and we need to return to what I would call true Conservative values.
It's interesting looking at Liz Truss and her platform and indeed her record in government, because she clearly is the more Thatcherite candidate of the top 3 or 4 candidates right now. But her history hasn't always been like that. At university, she was a member of the Liberal Democrats. There's a video going around of Liz Truss encouraging the abolition of the monarchy. Might that come back to bite?
Well, I mean, at university, I was a member of the Trampolining Society, Tom. I don't really think it makes much difference, really, particularly what you were doing 30-odd years ago. I mean, this isn't something I think that really has relevance to right now. Liz Truss is a clear Conservative. She's been a person of conviction since the time she's entered the House. She has constantly argued the case for lower taxes and smaller government in government, and everyone in Westminster knows that. So, you know, she's walked the walk and she's talking the talk. So I think, frankly, something from 30 years ago is really not particularly relevant.
Well, we will look forward with interest to see how this vote goes today. Results expected at 5 p.m, of course. For now, Julian Knight, thank you so much for joining us on the briefing this morning. That's all we have time for today. Thank you for sticking with us through this really interesting exploration of the Tory leadership contest. Up next, it's To The Point with Bev Turner. But first, here's the weather.
Good morning, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. Plenty of sunshine around for the next couple of days. Not as hot as the last few days, but we could see temperatures rising further as we head into the weekend. High pressure has been dominating, one area pushing away, but another one moving back in. But it's moving back in behind this cold front that's been drifting south, and that will introduce slightly cooler conditions for most of us today. It's a little fresher out there this morning, still very warm and humid in the south. But further north, we've got a fairly brisk wind continuing to bring some showers over the Highlands and the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. Maybe one or two showers getting into southwest Scotland during the day too. But for most places, dry and fine after the early cloud tending to break up across the south. Here, still pretty warm, 27, 28 Celsius, but not the 30 or more we've seen over recent days. And further north, generally fresher, more comfortable conditions, less humid, temperatures in the high teens, low 20s. Through this evening, we'll see a bit more cloud spilling into northwest England and Northern Ireland, with maybe one or two showers here. We'll keep some showers in the far north of Scotland as well, but further south it does stay dry. It'll be a cooler night again. Still temperatures staying in the teens, but lower than the night just gone. Into Thursday, and it's a fine summer's day across southern